What was once a neighborhood brewery is now a homeless camp.
It's getting harder and harder. Well, it's got a cover. It's got a way to block from the wind and the rain.
In the last few months, it's really popped off.
America, what I'm about to show you is a perfect example of how blue states have turned human suffering into a business model. An abandoned brewery in southeast Portland just became a homeless camp. A drop-in center near North Portland is destroying local businesses, and Oregon is now suing the federal government because Trump's administration wants to cut off the money spigot that's been funding this entire disaster. Because here's what nobody's telling you. This isn't about helping homeless people. It's about protecting a multi-billion-dollar industry that profits off of keeping people on the streets. What is up, guys? TYSON DELACRUZ here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. Portland has spent $3 billion on homelessness in just 5 years, and the problem has tripled. That, my friends, is not a failure. That is a business model, and I'm going to show you exactly how this grift works in Oregon. Let me start with what's happening in this abandoned brewery off of Southeast Foster's Road. Assembly Brewing shut down in May, and within months, it became a full-blown homeless encampment. But here's what makes this story so revealing. Most of the people camping there didn't come from the streets. They came from the Laurelwood Center, a neighborhood homeless shelter that kicked them out.
Brian says he and his girlfriend set up camp at the former brewery after they were kicked out of the Laurelwood Center, a neighboring homeless shelter.
It was closest, and it was raining, and what else can we do, you know? They just threw us out on the street.
So let me get this straight. Portland builds a homeless shelter with taxpayer money, kicks people out for breaking the rules, which they should. Then those same people set up a camp at an abandoned building across the street. And the city's response? They assessed the camp multiple times, but did nothing for months.
Curtis McDonald runs this auto repair shop across the street.
It's hard. Our customers, when they do come to see us, they drive by that, and we get a lot of people from out of town that come in and they just look at it and like, what is going on here?
He reports the camp to the city twice a week.
I feel like it's the one thing I can do.
His customers are scared to come to his shop. People from out of town drive by and ask, what the heck is going on here? But the city keeps assessing the situation while doing absolutely nothing. You know why? Because actually solving the problem would mean admitting that their entire approach is wrong. It would mean enforcing the rules at the shelter. It would mean not allowing people to camp on private property. It would mean holding people accountable for their behavior. But they can't do that because accountability would reduce the number of homeless people, which would reduce the need for homeless services, which would reduce the budget for all these NGOs and government agencies that depend on the homelessness continuing. Now let's talk about what's happening in North Portland. The county opened a drop-in center for homeless people in July, and within months, it has completely destroyed the surrounding areas.
We have a couple people who we also know they eventually get naked and start running around. They yell at customers, they steal things off their tables.
This is what happens when you open up a homeless facility with zero accountability and zero enforcement.
We sort of feel like a lot of times the city is using this as kind of a dumping ground for their problems that they don't want to deal with elsewhere.
And here's the kicker. When the community asked for a good neighbor agreement to establish some basic rules and accountability, Portland Mayor Keith Wilson directed his team not to enter that particular agreement. Let me repeat that again. The mayor refused to agree to be a good neighbor. Why? Because any agreement with accountability measures would expose the fact that these facilities don't work without strict enforcement. The strict enforcement would reduce the number of people using the facility, which would make it harder to justify the budget.
The numbers continue to go down. As of right now, I don't think it's going to make it.
Even county officials are admitting that the facility is failing, but instead of closing it or fundamentally changing the approach, they're proposing minor tweaks like better lighting, security cameras, maybe moving a bus stop. These are band-aids on a gunshot wound. The real solution would be simple. Enforce rules, require treatment for addiction, don't allow people to camp outside the facility, and arrest people who commit crimes. But they won't do that because it would work. And if it worked, they wouldn't need the facilities anymore. Now here's where the story gets really revealing. The Trump administration just changed federal homeless funding rules, and Oregon is suing to stop it. Let me just take a minute to explain what Trump did and why these people are panicking.
Under the new rules, providers can only spend 30% of their funds on permanent supportive housing. A major major cut after years of making long-term housing a priority. The rest of the funds must be spent on transitional housing.
The old Biden rules allowed unlimited spending on permanent supportive housing, which is a fancy way of saying giving homeless people free apartments forever with actual no requirements. Trump's new rules say you can only spend 30% on that, and the rest has to go to transitional housing, temporary shelter with the goal of getting people back on their feet.
This is a catastrophe in the making, and it's one that's a catastrophe of choice.
Listen to how they describe this. A catastrophe in the making. Why is it a catastrophe to require that homeless services actually transition people out of homelessness? Why is it a catastrophe to have time limits and accountability? I'll tell you why. Because the entire business model depends on permanent clients. If you actually help people get off the streets and become self-sufficient, you lose your funding. But if you keep them dependent on services forever, the money just keeps flowing.
Jimmy Jones, director of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, says the model shift, along with other federal rule changes like requiring treatment as a barrier for care and blocking funding for organizations that recognize transgender individuals, will do serious harm.
Those kinds of policy perspectives are going to do extraordinary harm and create extraordinary trauma for those groups of people seeking services.
And notice what else they're complaining about. Trump's rules require treatment as a condition for housing. They're also blocking funding for organizations that prioritize gender ideology over actually helping people. And these providers are acting like it's some kind of human rights violation. No. Requiring drug addicts to get treatment is not trauma. It's called helping them. Requiring people to follow basic rules is not discrimination. It's called accountability. But these organizations don't want accountability because accountability reduces their client base, which reduces their budgets, which threatens their jobs. Let me break down the numbers so you understand the scale of this particular grift. Portland has spent $3 billion on homelessness from 2021 to 2024. That's $6 million per year. And in that same time period, homelessness went from 4,000 people to over 12,000 people. That is a 200% increase. So they spend more money and got 3 times more homeless people. In any other industry, that would be called a catastrophic failure. But in the homeless industrial complex, that is called job security. Here's how the grift works. Step 1, create policies that enable homelessness. Decriminalize drugs, don't enforce camping bans, don't require treatment, give people everything they need to live on the streets. Step 2, when homelessness increases, demand more funding to address the crisis you created. Step 3, spend that money on services that don't actually solve the problem, but do employ thousands of people in nonprofit and government sectors. Step 4, when the problem gets worse, go back to step 2. And the beauty of this system from their perspective, it's self-perpetuating. The worse the problem gets, the more money that they can demand. The more money they get, the more people that they employ. The more people they employ, the more political power they have to resist any change to the particular system. Look at what happened with the brewery camp. The city knew about it for months. They quote unquote assessed the situation multiple times. They didn't do anything until they were forced by media attention and community pressure. And even then, their solution is to offer people shelter beds that most of them will refuse because the shelters have rules.
I'm all for it. Throw me in jail. I'll live there.
This person literally says, throw me in jail, because they'd rather be in jail than follow rules of a particular shelter. And Portland's response is to keep offering them shelter beds they won't use while allowing them to camp wherever the freak they want. You want to know what the solution is? It is not complicated. Other cities have figured it out. You give people 3 options: treatment, mental health care, or jail. But you can't live on the streets. That is it. That's the choice. If you're addicted to drugs, you go to treatment. If you're mentally ill, you go to a facility that can get you help. If you refuse help, you keep breaking the law, you go to jail. And if you accept help and follow the rules, we'll get you back on your feet with transitional housing that has a time limit and requirements. But Portland won't do this because it would actually work. And if it worked, they wouldn't need the $600 million annual budget. budget. They wouldn't need an army of social workers and case managers and nonprofit executives making six-figure salaries. They wouldn't need drop-in centers and safe injection sites and all the other infrastructure they built around permanent homelessness.
Provide security at the shelters, enforce the rules, or out they go.
Even random people in these YouTube comments understand this. Enforce the rules or kick them out. It's not rocket science. But Portland can't do it because their entire ideology is based on the idea that accountability is oppressive and rules are discriminatory. So instead, they sue the Trump administration for trying to impose accountability. They refuse to enter good neighbor agreements. They let people camp on private property for months while, quote unquote, assessing the situation. They kick people out of shelters and then act surprised when these people set up camps across the street.
But there's more of us than there are beds.
Let's not waste more money on beds if nobody's going to use them. Let's actually enforce the rules we have.
And notice the contradiction. Homeless advocates say there aren't enough beds, but business owners say nobody's using the beds that exist. Why? Because the beds come with rules, and Portland has created a system where following rules is quote unquote optional. The property owner of that brewery hasn't responded to requests about their plans for the lot yet. You know why? Because they probably can't do anything with it. If they try to develop it, the city will make it almost impossible with regulations and fees. If they try to kick the homeless people out, they'll call them heartless. So the property just sits there deteriorating while the camp just grows. America, this is what the homeless industrial complex looks like in action. It's not about helping people. It's about protecting budgets, jobs, and political power. Portland has proven that you can spend billions and billions of dollars and make the problem even worse. And the response from people running the system is to demand more money and sue anyone who tries to impose accountability. The Trump administration is trying to break the cycle by requiring treatment, limiting permanent housing, and demanding results. And Oregon's response is to sue to protect the system that has tripled homelessness while spending $3 billion. That, my friends, tells you everything you need to know. When accountability threatens your business model, you don't fix the business. You sue to stop accountability. That's the grift. And that's what's happening in every blue city in America. The federal funding changes start this spring. Watch what happens when these organizations have to show results instead of just spending the money. My prediction, they'll find new ways to game the system, new excuses on why it's not working, and new reasons why they need more money. Because solving the problem was never actually the goal. The grift is the goal. And as long as taxpayers keep funding failures, the grift will continue. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.